Friday the 13th. Everybody has heard of it, the infamous hockey mask killer who comes after groups of teenage campers at Camp Crystal Lake. The one, the only, Jason Voorhees is his name. Obviously, we know his mom was the killer in the original, but Jason is basically the face of the horror genre, so I don't think it's important that we mention her. But yes, like I was saying, this series about the serial killer known as Jason Voorhees went on to have 10 installments, plus a crossover movie with Freddy Krueger and a upcoming Peacock TV series coming later this year. Surely you'd think, that's a lot of Jason Voorhees. This series must be quite amazing if they decided to do all of this with it. But unfortunately, that is just not the case in my opinion. As a matter of fact, I feel like Friday the 13th is kind of overrated. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Ty, surely you don't know what you're rambling on about. But no, I know exactly what I'm rambling on about. As a matter of fact, I'm so confident in my opinion on this topic that I decided to make an entire video about it. So yes, in today's video, I'm going to be explaining to you guys what a lot of you probably consider a horrible take and explain why I think the Friday the 13th franchise is just a tad bit overrated. But yes, without further ado, I think we should just get straight into it. Now before we actually get into the blood and guts of this topic, let me preface this by saying, because I already know you Friday fans only clicked on this video so you could disagree with everything I said, the entire series is not overrated in my opinion. W clickbait, I know. But no, for real though, I don't think the entirety of the franchise is mid and overrated. As a matter of fact, I'm glad Friday the 13th is a horror classic. If I thought the whole series was overrated, I wouldn't think that way. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna actually start explaining right now why I'm halfway bullshitting about this video's topic. I think the first Friday the 13th is just fine for when it came out. At the time, the late 70s into the early 80s, the horror genre was booming and possibly the biggest it had ever been at that point. And movies weren't even able to be made with like super high-end technology and quality back then, so it isn't very surprising to me that a movie as low quality as Friday the 13th is looked at as the face of the genre. Also, this movie already had a low budget as it is. Surely they weren't going to make a movie that the next generation glazes over and over without crazy CGI and new technology in it. So, the first Friday the 13th, in my opinion, is a safe zone for this video. However, I can't say the same for some of the other movies. I probably won't heavily talk about a single movie out of the entire franchise throughout the video, but I'll definitely mention specific movies that support my claim. The first thing I want to mention is, like I was saying a few moments ago, how low quality the movies are. Like I said, the first one was made in the early 80s with a low budget, so it wasn't a surprise to me that it didn't have the best quality. However, by the time the second movie rolled around, even just being like a year later I think, already had developed better quality, better CGI, better props, pretty much better everything. I mean, it still wasn't like crazy steps up since it was still obviously the early 80s, but it was definitely a step up from the first film. Now this movie, Friday the 13th Part 2, if I'm being honest, the only thing that differed it from the first was the effects and the fact that Jason was actually in it. Other than that, it's pretty much the same shit, not gonna lie. Same plot, same sequencing, same setting, everything about it was just the same with different characters. I mean, Jason was an absolute unit in this movie, but that doesn't really compensate for the fact that everything else was literally just the fucking same. Still a good movie though. Unlike some of the others to follow, which weren't the same old thing being done 1,000 times, but some bullshit that shouldn't have even been made into a script for real. For example, Jason Goes to Manhattan. Or, I'm sorry, Jason Takes Manhattan. Possibly stupider than Jason in Space, which was actually an amazing movie in my opinion, but yeah, Jason Takes Manhattan, Friday Part 9 if I'm not mistaken, was some of the stupidest shit I've ever seen. If I'm being honest, it basically just felt like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie with a serial killer in it. And again, like I've said in almost every video where I'm shitting on something, sometimes dumb movies are the pinnacle of the horror genre. However, that doesn't make up for the fact that this movie was some bullshit jam-packed into a 2-hour long film almost. Then, even if we're not talking about specific movies, like I said earlier, I didn't want to do that, most of the Friday movies, like I said a few moments ago, are literally just the same thing. The plot, the setting, the end, it's all the same. I'd honestly say like the first 5 or 6 Friday movies after the first are literally just the same thing as the first. Same plot, same character behaviors, same everything, you get the idea. Not saying these aren't good movies, but nobody wants to see the same movie over and over in a franchise. And for anybody who thought they were about to go to the comments and comment some bullshit like, you could say the same thing about Scream. Don't ever compare Scream to Friday the 13th again. Scream is a different plot, different characters, different kills, every single movie. Whether you like every movie or not, you can't deny the fact that they do something bigger and better every time. Also, yes, I'm sure you guys saw that coming. It would not be a Ty Sunley video if I was not glazing the shit out of Scream yet again. But yeah, back to what I was saying about Friday. They didn't actually decide to switch up much of anything until like the 7th or 8th movie, and by then, a lot of people had already decided they were done with the series due to the repetitiveness. And you want to know the craziest part? The last few Friday movies are better than most of the first. I don't care, argue with the wall, whether you like the space theme or not, Jason X is overall a better film than most of the first like 5. Even the 2009 reboot is better than a couple of them. In Freddy vs. Jason, I loved that movie, arguably better than any of the Friday movies. Obviously not as iconic and obviously not as memorable, but still, I think overall the movie was just better, like done better than a lot of the others. And remember this, guys, after Scream came out in 1996, a lot of horror franchises decided to get it together and make better movies towards the late 90s. Some of my favorite horror movies are from after Scream came out. Scream is literally my favorite, like I said earlier. But for some reason, even though all the other horror movie franchises were stepping up their game and trying to do better after seeing the masterpiece that Scream was, the Friday crew saw all of these franchises trying to make better films from that point forward, and they decided they were going to do their own thing. Cause just 5 years after Scream came out, they released Jason X. Which again, isn't a bad movie just in general, but if we're critiquing it as a Friday film, it makes no sense and adds almost nothing to the pretty much already dead storyline. Let's be completely honest here for a sec, the original Friday storyline was completely in the gutter by the final chapter. How are you gonna name it the final chapter and then make 6 more movies after? But yeah, like I was saying, this movie didn't follow the original storyline at all, which kinda pissed me off. I know it's important to switch it up after a while, but this was just a 4th movie, and considering it's called the final chapter, they 100% could have just ended it off with something that followed the original story, but no. They made something that almost felt like they were doing too much, and then completely trashed the OG story by the time Jason Takes Manhattan came out. Again, some of the newer movies are still just better than the old ones. But yes, as you guys can probably tell by this point, I think the Friday the 13th series or franchise is overrated. I want to add that I don't think any of the movies, well, except for one, obviously, are bad. I just think the entire franchise as a whole is way more glazed than it needs to be. Also, sometimes weird random sequels that make no sense, like Jason X, are what make a movie enjoyable. But yeah, to really sum it all up, Friday the 13th is still a classic movie and overall series, and was especially good for its time period. I just think nowadays, it doesn't really live up to some of the other horror franchises that we've got. But yeah, I think that's gonna have to conclude today's video. If you guys enjoyed, feel free and do not feel afraid to glaze me in the comments. Follow the Twitch, follow the TikTok, follow the IG. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.